Closed captioning for Justice and Law Weekly is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices in support of quality public television for the Chicago area.
Welcome to the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly. I'm Janine Cordero, a member of the Chicago Bar Association. Most judges in Illinois are elected. On March 18th, citizens across Illinois will have the opportunity to vote in the general primary. On the ballot will be lawyers running for judicial vacancies. Judges make serious decisions affecting the lives of hundreds of people each day. It is important for voters to take the time to learn about judicial candidates. Here to tell us how you can easily find information about judicial candidates are John Jacoby and Risa Lanier. Mr. Jacoby is a partner with the law firm of Nyan, Bambrick, Kinsey & Lowry. He concentrates his practice in civil litigation. He is also the chair of the Chicago Bar Association Judicial Evaluation Committee. Welcome, John.
Thanks.
Risa Lanier is an assistant state's attorney with the Cook County State's Attorney's Office and is a member of the Chicago Bar Association's Judicial Evaluation Executive Committee. Welcome, Risa.
Thank you.
So, John, over 400 judges serving in Cook County are elected, and all but associate judges are elected. Can you tell us a little bit about the election process?
Well, sure. It's just a political election, just like all of the other candidates. They file either as a Republican or a Democrat. There are different sub-circuits that they either run in or they run in countywide. And then you also have the same process for appellate openings or openings for the Supreme Court.
Very good. So they do have to designate a party affiliation at the primary level.
Yes. So on March 18th, if you're pulling a Republican ballot, you'll only be looking at those judges that are running in the Republican primary, and same for the Democrats.
Very good. Risa, I don't think that the public understands that a judge has many responsibilities, often many more than just coming out and appearing in a courtroom for a few hours a day. Can you talk a little bit about some of those responsibilities?
Sure. As members of the judicial part of our legislative or our political branches, so to speak, the judges are involved in the legal process from beginning to the end. So whether they are circuit court judges or appellate court judges or Supreme Court judges, the moment a case appears on that judge's docket or call, they're involved in the process. In addition to making the rulings in court and appearing, with the lawyers on a particular issue, they have duties off the bench. And off of the bench, they are responsible for handling their court call. Much like lawyers, they're responsible for being just as diligent in their rulings, just as diligent in managing their call, making sure their rulings are timely, making sure that the lawyers and the parties appear timely before them. Again, just making the process that much more diligent so that cases don't languish, so to speak, in court. Mm-hmm. In addition to that, the judges, like lawyers, are also responsible for knowing the law. They're responsible for being educated. Each year, the judges go through school, so to speak. They have to attend seminars to make sure that they are educated as well on the law.
Very good. And they also have some managerial duties, responsibilities within the court, such as a presiding judge, correct?
Right. There's a presiding judge for each of the different divisions, and they're basically in a management position of that division. So there's a presiding judge for criminal, there's a presiding judge for the law division, and their main duty is to make sure that those courtrooms run efficiently for the people.
Very good. John, how can, before we get into a discussion about how we rate judges, evaluate judges at the Chicago Bar Association in particular, let's talk about what the negative impact of a poor judge or not a very good judge could be on the court and on the public.
Well, if you vote for mayor or alderman, those people are never going to sit in judgment on you for a traffic ticket or for making decisions, say, on custody in a divorce or other types of issues that really affect people. So the voters have to understand that if they're ever brought into the judicial system, either the criminal courts or the civil courts, judges can have a huge impact on their personal lives, much more so than the political races that get get so much more attention and so much more money put into them. A bad judge or a judge that's not competent, that doesn't know how to follow the law, creates serious problems. So does a judge that doesn't run his or her docket in a timely manner. Lawyers charge by the hour, and if a judge is late for a call, you could have 30 or 40 lawyers sitting in the courtroom waiting for the judge to start the call, each one of them billing their clients for sitting there waiting because a 9 o'clock call doesn't start until 9:30 or 10 o'clock. So even the manner in which they administer their courtroom has kind of ripple effects through the system.
And coupled with that, what you mentioned not keeping cases moving along. I think many of us have heard about the backlog of cases on the docket, which is what we call, where these matters are put. And that really affects people's lives too, because if they're not getting into court and getting their issues resolved in a timely fashion, that could be a very serious problem as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're all lawyers, and we all associate with people who aren't lawyers. And the number one complaint that we hear is how long it takes. And, why is my divorce taking 2 years when there's not a whole lot of arguments going on? Or why is my civil case taking so long? So, that's kind of the number one complaint that I hear from people who are kind of outside the system but do have some case going on, is just the length of time that it takes. And also their frustration that they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake.
Right. And Risa, why don't we touch briefly on the difference between civil and criminal courts, because I don't think maybe the public fully understands that they're two separate systems.
Sure. When you speak of criminal court, you're talking about a court where the people who are accused of crimes and people who are victims of crimes appear in front of, as opposed to civil court, where you're dealing with more civil matters that don't directly affect the freedoms of someone or a defendant, or so to speak. So when you think of, very simply, of being sued, that would happen in civil court, whereas being arrested, that would happen in criminal court.
But these attorneys who are going to be on the primary ballot are running for all positions, so they don't parse them out into criminal judges or civil judges.
No, that comes about. I mean, typically, a new judge, if they've had no experience, they'll start out in traffic court, and they kind of run them through a 5 or 6 month period in traffic court, and then the presiding judges decide where they think those judges will best fit within the court system. And one of the eye-opening things for me as chair of the Judicial Evaluation Committee, because we see every candidate and we see every retention judge come through, is even as a lawyer, I never recognized how many different courtrooms there are. I mean, I never knew that there were 4 courtrooms that were dedicated to doing nothing but post-decree issues in divorces. So you get a divorce, you finalize, you get a ruling, and then we keep 4 courtrooms busy with people who are coming back in to enforce those rulings, because obviously someone says, pay this amount of child support or do this on custody, and then the parties don't follow the rulings, and so then they're back in court.
So it's really to enforce what the agreement was.
Post-remedies courtrooms, the different layers of the criminal courts, the different family court divisions, the foreclosure courts that deal with all of the mortgage foreclosures. I mean, there are so many different places where an individual who's elected as a judge may be put that we really do need competency system-wide, because each one of them has a very significant role to play.
Absolutely. You touched on one of the criteria. This Chicago Bar Association has been doing these judicial evaluations for a very, very long time. I think we've had some involvement since 1887 in the process.
That's what they say. I wasn't around back then. But yeah.
I'm sure it's evolved. And I think in 1976 is when we set about with the current rules by which we evaluate candidates for the bench. And let's touch on some of the things that the Judicial Evaluation Committee looks at. First of all, the committee is comprised of lawyers, but I think we do also have some members of the community who can sit as well. And so, so what happens, let's talk about the process. In the beginning, there's an investigation. Why don't you talk about that, Risa?
Sure. So the process begins with the candidate filling out an application. And in that application, they would include pertinent information, which includes their education history, their employment history, And most importantly, they list references. These references, it could be 30 to 60 references in an application, and the references are then broken down by personal references, judicial references, meaning the judges that the candidate has appeared in front of, as well as adversarial references, those references or those persons who are on the other side of the law, so to speak, on the other side of the issue. So then after the application is submitted, it then goes through an investigation process, and that's handled by the investigation committee. Typically, 2 people are assigned to an investigation to a particular candidate, and they're randomly assigned to a particular candidate, and their responsibilities would be to follow up on those references and those things that were listed in the application. So the 2 investigators will contact those 30 to 60 references, and we'll ask them questions based upon the qualifications and the criteria that we look for in regards to the qualifications for that particular candidate. And then at the end of the process, the investigators will summarize the candidate's application as well as the findings from the references that they've contacted and put it together in a thorough investigative report. So that's the first step of the process.
Very good. And then that report comes to the committee for review.
Yes.
And does everybody get invited for a hearing, for an interview in front of a panel?
Well, we have, our committee has over 200 members, so we can't invite everybody. We do have a group that is the hearing group, the hearings committee, and so depending upon the number and how many rooms we would be running, there would be anywhere from 12 to maybe as many as 25 committee members that would be in the room for the hearing. And so the candidate is brought in. Everyone that's on the hearing panel for that particular candidate would get a copy of the investigative report that Risa talked about, also get a copy of the application. And the application is something that's really broad and probably takes the candidates, who knows, hours to complete, because we do ask for pretty exhaustive information. Usually the investigators are there at the hearing, so if there are any questions about the report, they can be talked to ahead of bringing the person in. And then the candidate's brought in, and we spend 15 to 20, sometimes 25 to 30 minutes speaking with the person, asking them questions, finding out and exploring their qualifications. And then they're allowed to give a statement as to why they think they're a qualified or highly qualified candidate. And then they leave the room and we have a discussion and then vote.
And let's talk about some of the criteria that goes into the evaluation, what factors you look for that attorneys believe and people, members of the community who participate on the committee believe make a good judge. You touched on punctuality and the ability to keep things moving, showing up on time and handling a case. Legal knowledge and ability are also part of that criteria. You want to talk a little to some of the other things we look for?
Yeah, I mean, the committee generally, we have a general guideline of 12 years of legal experience, practicing as an attorney for 12 years. A candidate can be found qualified even without 12 years, but it would be a very extraordinary candidate that would meet that. Beyond just the time spent in practice, we have a fairly heavy emphasis on their courtroom adversarial litigation experience. If you're going to be a judge calling balls and strikes, we think it makes sense that you have been in that arena yourself and experienced that and have some experience. Certainly it's not a hard and fast requirement, but it's certainly something that we look for. In terms of legal ability, we're looking for someone who is better than the average person that practices in the field of the candidate. So, you know, we think judges ought to be the cream of the crop of the legal profession. It's kind of the pinnacle job in the legal profession, and so that's the kind of candidate that we're looking for.
I think temperament is also an important criteria. Risa, maybe you want to talk about that. Have you been in front of any angry judges?
I have. I have, and yes, temperament plays a big part. It sets the overall tone for the courtroom and the court, experience. And it not only involves the lawyers, but everyone that's present. So members of the public, those victims or those plaintiffs or defendants in a courtroom, it really does set the overall tone. So if you're appearing in front of a judge who has a bad temperament, then things don't seem to get done as expeditiously as they should in court. And again, when you look at our judges, these are the political figures that your average citizen will probably come into contact more often than others, all the way from a simple traffic ticket to the other more pressing and more life-changing matters such as divorce. So of course you want the people that they appear in front of to have the requisite temperament.
And you're in a felony trial division, so you're seeing some very serious trial matters that really are very emotional for the defendant, for the families involved. Exactly. And I'm sure that the judges have the ability to make quite a large impression on the people who come before them. And if they're not treated respectfully and with some dignity, I can imagine that that becomes a very serious problem.
Absolutely. When you think about criminal law, especially those more serious, violent cases that you see in court, on both sides of the coin, you have a defendant's family, they're emotional, the defendant is emotional, and so is the victim's family. And so having the requisite temperament really does weigh heavily on those two sides.
Yeah, what happens in a courtroom, the decorum, the way people are accorded respect or not, it really is reflective of the bar. And so for Cook County, for the Cook County Bar, if you're a juror or a witness or a defendant and you come into a courtroom and the judge doesn't have the proper temperament, you go away from your experience with the Cook County judicial system with a very negative opinion. And so it's incumbent upon all of the members of the bar and upon the judiciary to make that a professional, serious, and efficient process when the different folks come in. And as attorneys, we know, oh, I've got this judge, great, it's going to be a good trial. It'll be run efficiently, it'll be run effectively, there won't be any issues on appeal, we'll get to the resolution. Oh, I've got this judge, don't really even want to be in that courtroom. So we kind of feel like we know what to look for in a candidate so that they'll be the kind of courtroom that we would want to be in as attorneys or as defendants or plaintiffs or anything.
Integrity is also very important. We're looking for individuals who haven't necessarily been convicted of a crime or have really bad financial problems. So clearly we look into, the Chicago Bar Association does look into the more personal aspects of a person's life as well.
Right, beyond what we ask them in the questionnaire, we also run searches through the different litigation clerk sites to see if they've been sued. We ask them about that. We ask them about any kind of disciplinary complaints. If they've been up on appeal or if they've had cases up on appeal and been criticized by judges, we'll find that out as well. And really, within the adversarial practice, if you've tried cases against other folks, when we talk to those people that have tried cases against you, they're usually the best barometer if somebody has integrity, if their word can be trusted, or if they felt like they played too fast and loose with the law.
Very good. So after the investigation and you have the hearing, the members vote, and this is all very confidential. Nothing is discussed outside of the room. Then the panel issues a finding. And the findings can be highly qualified, or not recommended. So can we talk a little bit about what those different ratings mean?
Sure. When you think of someone who's highly qualified, as John mentioned before, we're looking for the cream of the crop. They're basically at the top, those persons who are highly qualified. Those that we find qualified, they have put in the necessary work, they have the necessary experience, the necessary integrity, and temperament. So we find those persons qualified. Those who are not recommended are found not recommended for two reasons, really. One, if a candidate first does not submit to our process, then they're automatically found not recommended because we didn't have the opportunity to evaluate them. So it wouldn't be fair, of course, to the other candidates to give them any other rating. And also persons can be found not recommended, again, if they don't have the 12 years of experience and there's nothing else that makes them an exceptional lawyer at that point, then we find them not recommended. And also, if we find that the they don't have enough legal experience, maybe not enough experience in court at that particular time, they could be found not recommended.
And so somebody who maybe would get a not recommended because they didn't have the enough experience behind them could maybe go back and practice and, you know, enhance their profile, so to speak, and come back, you know, some years later and receive a qualified or highly qualified rating.
Yeah, we've seen candidates like that, and along with, well, if the voters would go to our pocket guide, they would just see highly qualified, qualified, or not recommended. But if they go to the green guide that's put out by the CBA, then they'll see a short, probably 4 to 5, 6 sentence description of the candidate. And many times in those, in the not recommended, we'll say, this person has fine temperament and seems to have the necessary qualities to make a good judge, but they just lack the trial experience, or they need a few more years to develop a little bit more breadth in their legal career. So if it's a good candidate that just has a hole in their resume, we'll try to point them in the right direction, the things that the committee believes that they should do in order to come back and get a qualified rating next time around.
And you just made a great segue, because I was going to talk about the green guide and the pocket guide. So the pocket guide is basically like a shorthand for the green guide. I know the green guide can be pretty lengthy, and both can be found on the Chicago Bar Association's website. If you go to the main page at chicagobar.org, you can click on Make Your Vote Count and pull up the guides there. What I want to make a special emphasis on is the fact that a lot of people don't think they can bring any information into the voting polls with them, but they can. And so I think it's important to emphasize that the pocket guide, which is really a very one-page or two-page document,
2 pages, yeah.
Can be just printed out, put it in your pocket, take it into the booth with you when you vote, and it'll give you great guidance on who's not recommended. And that's really what we want to try to emphasize, is to keep those not recommended candidates from succeeding at the primary level.
Yes, because the way that it has worked in Cook County is, once a judge is elected, they're pretty much on the bench for as long as they want to be.
It's very difficult to knock them off the bench.
Each judge comes up for retention every 6 years, but in the retention, it's not, they don't run against anybody else. So there's no other opposing candidate to throw out a big campaign to say they have not been a good judge. So they just run 70, 80 at a time for retention. And the history of the retention elections has been, we haven't seen a judge ever get booted off the ballot for over 20 years now. So that's why this primary is so important, because many of the Democratic elections, only Democrats are running. The Republicans don't have someone running against them, so the primary is really the election. And if you have a not recommended or an unqualified candidate get through that primary, they're going to be on the bench for a very long time.
Right, so it's much easier to pay attention now, and I know statistically about 25% of the people don't finish the ballot. I know it's really lengthy. You look at all these names and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to be in here another 10 minutes trying to, but it's so important. Because you never know, as a member of the public, when you might have to appear before a judge. It could be, like you said, in a divorce case. It could be with a traffic ticket. It could be, you know, sadly for something like a mortgage foreclosure, or worse, for a criminal matter. So it really is important to you know, stay in that booth and vote correctly for the right people. So let's talk about the green guide just a little bit. It's a little more lengthy, and it gives a little more meat about exactly why this person was highly qualified, qualified, or not recommended.
Yeah, it gives you some background. It gives you a little bit of the biography of the candidate or the sitting judge. It tells you specific reasons why they were either found highly qualified, qualified, or not recommended. So it gives you a little bit more flavor for what the investigators found and what we found in the hearing process.
And I understand there's a mobile app. Does that include both the green guide and the pocket guide?
Yes.
Or just, okay.
Yes. So there is, again, at chicagobar.org, you can go there, and there's instructions on how to download these into your phone. So you don't even have to take the piece of paper into the booth. You just need to take your phone, and it'll be downloaded for you, and you can scroll through as you go through the ballot. and make sure that you're only voting for qualified or highly qualified
Yeah,
candidates.
so all those young tech-savvy people, they get to take their phone in instead of a piece of paper.
Hey, my mom's on Facebook, so it's not just the young people.
What can the public do, Risa, to kind of spread the word in their own communities about this information about judges, judicial candidates?
I think the best would be for those who do have the pocket guides to encourage their family members and their friends to do the same, to download that information or put it on their mobile app and take it with them, because it does make things a lot easier at the poll if you know going in what you're looking for. And beyond that, all lawyers, any members of the Chicago Bar Association are also encouraged to do the same, to download the information and pass it on to the public.
Very good. And besides the mobile app, is there any other place where people can go for this information? Will it be in the newspaper or?
Typically, the Chicago Tribune will list. Yeah, and there are other bar associations that are also out there.
Do we ever? Does the Chicago Bar Association ever work with these other bar associations on the judicial evaluations?
With the other bar associations, we have on occasion in the past, but generally each association does their own and then does their own campaign to get their ratings out there. If you look through the various ratings, there's a fairly good consistency amongst the candidates that have been found qualified or not recommended amongst the various bar associations, though.
Very good. And so maybe sending out the link to the Green Guide, Pocket Guide on email would be a great way to do it.
Well, that's the nice thing about electronic media is you can download it and then you can send out an email to your friends and family list or whatever, and just ask them to pay attention as they're at the polls.
Very good.
Disseminate it on Facebook.
Well, hopefully the public will take this information and share it, take it with you into the primary election on Election Day, March 18th. It's very, very important to make sure we get good judges on the bench. So John Jacoby and Risa Lanier, thank you for joining us. Viewers, please remember how important it is to select the most qualified judicial candidates in the upcoming primary. You can access the Green Guide and the Pocket Guide at www.chicagobar.org. I'm Janine Cordero. Thank you for watching the Chicago Bar Association's Justice and Law Weekly.
Closed captioning for Justice and Law Weekly is provided in part by the Clifford Law Offices in support of quality public television for the Chicago area.